I want to tell you about a new podcast called Amuse News. Publishing multiple days a week, Amuse News is your source for food news, interviews from around the food world, and more. On the show, we'll be engaging with food storytellers, from chefs to advocates to people working in the field, and many more. Find Amuse News wherever you get your podcasts. Amuse News is a destination for everyone who's looking for a new, insightful look into the world of food.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. For more information, visit korin.com.
Hi, this is Joe Campanelli, the host of In the Drink. You're listening to Heritage Radio Network, broadcasting live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. If you like this program, visit heritageradionetwork.org for thousands more.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode of The Line, Season 1, Episode 1. Very excited to be part of the Heritage Radio Network family. I'm your host, Eli Sussman, co-chef and co-owner of Samisa, an Ed and Bev's restaurant in Brooklyn. Each episode I'll be sitting down with a guest as we trace the line of their career through a one-on-one conversation about their childhood, first jobs in food, and the path they chose that led them to become the chef or restaurateur they are today. From how it all began to where they are now and everything in between, this is The Line. My guest today is Zahra Tangorra. She was born and raised on the North Shore of Long Island in Northport, where her parents ran a catering business called Lovin Oven. In 2010, at the age of 26 and with no previous restaurant experience, she opened Brucie, a charming Italian restaurant in Cobble Hill. Zahra, welcome to the show.
Hi.
I wanted to start by talking about the Lovin Oven. So it was this progressive catering company. Your parents opened it in the 70s?
Yeah.
And they were doing some things that people hadn't really seen yet in food. So I wanted to know, how did your parents get into the food catering business, and what did they serve there?
Well, my folks met when my mom was 19 and my dad was 22, and they were both very, lost souls looking to kind of just do something different with their lives. And so they decided to open this catering business. They were not professional cooks. It wasn't like a lifelong dream. And they brought really exotic foods to Long Island, like quiche and popovers, chowder. No, but these are things that people were just kind of getting into, in the you read about in the early 70s, in history textbooks about, people really getting into world food, and you'll see people we had quiche and we had
fondue,
puttanesca, and all these weird things in one meal that were just world foods. So they did that. My dad got extremely into Moroccan cooking, and he would do Moroccan chicken, pigeon pie. And
what's pigeon pie?
It's pastilla. It's Moroccan chicken, so
Okay.
it was traditionally made with pigeon. He would make it with chicken. And you wrap it inside pastry.
They
and
weren't ready for pigeon yet.
Long Island wasn't ready for
Northport, yeah.
I think people may still not be ready for pigeon in New York. But yeah, they were my dad got really into baking and doing breads and just doing really funky kind of stuff.
And where are they from? Are they born and raised in
Yeah, they're both
Northport?
Huntington. They were
Okay.
both from Huntington. It was down the block. But yeah, they're both Long Islanders.
And so they were inspired to start it just based on flavors that they had experienced traveling?
They didn't really travel outside of the country. I think that they were just part of a movement of, kind of post hippie, but not disco, cocaine kind of vibe either. Just kind of, if you think of I always think of my parents as being part of the Annie Hall cast. You know what I mean? Just kind of kind of funky post 60s, early 70s, funky weirdos.
Is it still open today?
No, they sold it right after I was born.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They had it before I was born, and they sold it and moved down to Florida to open a business called Zaza's Hot Hors d'oeuvres, named after me, which was going to specialize in tasting a piece of the world's cuisine. So you're just going to have a nibble of, an Italian pastry. Or my mom always was obsessed with pocket pies, which she wanted me to make when I went into food someday. She's like, make pocket pies my father, your father and I used to do. I'm like, pocket pies has a sexual kind of connotation to me. It just reminds me of
Doesn't sound super appealing, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, so they
Although I do like Hot Pockets a lot.
I love a Hot Pocket,
yeah.
although they're very, very dangerous, dangerously hot.
Yeah, wait 5 minutes before
Yeah,
you
exactly.
eat one. So did you move to Florida?
Yeah, but when I was like a little baby, like this is a part of my history that like doesn't mean like I don't remember it. You know what I mean? The business failed, and they moved back to Long Island and totally pursued like very different careers. My mom's a therapist, and my dad became a country club manager. So I guess he stayed in the business. But
So even though you didn't really grow up in the catering business, and by the time you were around, they were doing other things, what was childhood like in Northport? Did food dominate your family life? Was it ever present in your home? Or
yeah, it's interesting. Like my dad was like super like busy. He worked like an animal, and like we all know that kind of vibe from like working in kitchens. He wasn't in the kitchen, but he was like, you know, running a business that was involved with food. So he was busy. So you know, it was special to cook with him, and he'd be like, this is how you make this bread, which, as I was just telling you before the show, I obviously didn't retain because I've never made bread before. But, you know, I really picked it up. Like, I remember my grandpa really cooking is kind of the, like, classic, like, I remember my grandparents. But I really do. Like, I remember my grandpa, like, this big guy with this, like, mega belly and, like, gigantic ears, like, sitting by the stove. He would, like, make Sunday sauce. And he'd, like, sit by the stove and, like, nibble out of the sauce, like, on a high stool, like, for the entire day. So
what was his name?
John Tangorra as well. My dad was also John Tangorra.
And so a Sunday sauce, for those that don't know,
It's like a gravy.
It's an all-day.
It's an all-day event.
It's a red gravy.
Exactly.
So gravy versus sauce, why is it called one? Why is it called the other?
Well, it's kind of like, you know, a regional thing.
Mm-hmm.
But a Sunday sauce is like meat. You put whatever kind of meat you have around. Ribs, maybe a pork chop, definitely always meatballs, sausage, and you kind of like let it stew down all day. And if you were my grandpa, you would have eaten so much out of it by the time it gets to the table for the rest of the family. There's just like little scraps left.
There's 4 ounces at the bottom of the pot that are left for the family.
Yeah, exactly.
And so did you ever get to help? Were you like on the knee, on the stool,
actually,
sitting with grandpa?
You know what I really helped him with is like, I remember so vividly, it's weird, like the things that stick out, like your childhood memories. I remember going out with him. He had a beautiful garden. They lived in like, you know, a pretty like poor area in Huntington Station. My grandfather had the nicest garden. He would grow the most beautiful tomatoes and pick like dandelions out of the garden to make dandelion salad and stuff. But I remember going out and picking tomatoes with him. And like to this day, it's like that smell of like, you know, a tomato on the vine when you just like smell it, or it's like it has that like peppery scent. That was how I helped. And it's like probably one of my strongest food memory ever is like picking tomatoes.
Anything else in his repertoire besides the Sunday
Oh
gravy?
yeah, he made pizza rustica. Well, you probably haven't had that. You're not a dairy guy.
What is it?
I'll tell it to you. Pizza rustica is like you mix together ricotta and like ground salami and like eggs, and then you like pack it inside a pizza crust, almost in like a shape of a lasagna though. Mm-hmm. Pizza crust on the bottom, then you like layer provolone and like prosciutto, then this filling, another pizza crust, more provolone and prosciutto, more filling, and then, you know, pack the whole thing up with a topping of pizza crust, and you bake it.
So it's a pizza crust lasagna, essentially.
Basically, yeah. It's
and then do you cut
delicious.
it into squares?
Yeah, you cut it into squares. It's like an Easter thing.
You eat it with your hands like a pizza? Or
Well, you can, I guess you could. We usually use a knife and fork.
Yeah,
Or
okay.
just a fork.
Pretty sloppy.
It's a sloppy thing. A lot of breads, like Easter bread and the best sticky buns, like in the entire world. We used to make them at Brucie. We always put it on the menu, John Tangorra sticky buns.
That's awesome that
they're good.
that it carried through from what you had learned from him.
Yeah.
So being a kid, you're around all this food. You're by the water. Was that a part of your life? Did you go fishing? Being on the North Fork,
Yeah.
I know that there's the North Fork is having a moment, I suppose, that people are discovering it somehow for the first time, and that it has a bounty. There's wineries there.
Yeah.
What was it like being out there before it was quote unquote cool to go vacation for the summer?
Well, I'll tell you what was
on the
really,
North Fork.
What was really different. Well, like in terms of like fishing, again, I would go out with my grandpa to like the harbor sometimes, but I don't know. You probably shouldn't eat what you catch over in like, you know, Cold Spring Harbor. But what was really different was going out to Montauk. Like when I was growing up, like Montauk was for people who say Montauk, like Montauk. Montauk used to be like a real shithole. Like it was like a terrible, like, no, actually I shouldn't say terrible. That's not the right word. But it was just like a real rundown place for like locals. You know what I mean?
It was a fishing
rundown in the
village,
best
right?
possible way. Yeah. It's like where people from Long Island, so rich people would go to the Hamptons, you know, and then like us normal folk would go out to Montauk, and it was
So for people that don't know, Montauk is at the way
At the
end.
way end,
They
yeah.
call it the end.
Yeah,
and
but it was like good old fashioned family fun.
Right.
There's like a pitch and putt and like soft serve ice cream, and like the most famous person you would ever see there was Chevy Chase, which was like amazing. And I did see him there many times as a kid.
I mean, that's awesome.
It was great. Christmas
Yeah.
Vacation, P.S. favorite movie ever. So for me, it was a really big deal. But that was like the thing that I think was like most different. And now Montauk is very much like, last time I was there, I think I saw Terry Richardson. I was like, this place is over. Not that there's anything wrong with Terry Richardson. I mean, God bless, but
It's gotten more commercialized than what happens on the North Fork, possibly. So
Yeah.
when you spent time there as a kid, what was it like being in the country, or was it really built up? I mean, what were the 80s like?
No, I mean, it was definitely much more chill, but people are just like not obsessed with food the way they are today, right? And with like being everywhere, right? So like, I'm here, it's beautiful, I heard this place is cool, I need to take a picture of it and put it on my Instagram, and like, I went to this cool, you know what I mean? And there's good and bad things about that stuff. So, like most places in the 80s or the 90s, there's a little bit more of a purity to it, you know what I mean? I always thought of Long Island. Long Island gets like a little bit of a rap from like certain parts of Long Island that we all know. Like, you're like, oh, I'm from Long Island. Like, oh, you're from Long Island? You got to go to the mall, get your coffee, and talk about it. I'm like, I guess so. But really, it's like a beautiful place. And
by the way, you sound like that when you're not on the radio. That is your normal. That is your normal conversational
like
voice.
Eli, you want to go get a coffee and we'll talk and catch up. But no, it's beautiful, and it still is. And there's like gorgeous farmland and really nice like a bird sanctuary out there that my family and I always go to.
So you get back quite a bit. Your family, your mom is still there.
My
your
mom
dad
lives
is still
there. No, my dad lives in North Carolina and
Okay.
Asheville now. But I go visit my mom a lot.
So, as you're growing up there, you decided, you made the decision that you wanted to go to FIT.
Yeah.
Right? So that became your kind of trajectory away
Yeah.
from Long Island. I'm curious about that part of your life. Obviously, you've always been creative. Can you talk a little bit about how the fashion world interests you and how that shaped the earlier part of your life?
Yeah, well, when I was in high school, I was really into like underground hip hop. I was really into like graffiti and like that whole culture, and like I really just wanted to like be in the city. I mean, growing up like close to the city, you spend a lot of time there anyway, so it wasn't like I need to get myself to the big city someday. You know what I mean? Like, it was an easy transition kind of. But so I went there for fine arts, and I just wanted to be an artist. Like I was like a 18-year-old who was like just learning about like world affairs and politics and art, and I was like, I'm gonna make like political art, and like, you know what I mean? Like, it was when Bush was still president. I was like angry about that. I was like making artwork about it a lot, and I just wanted to be in New York, and I really thought my career would be as an artist. Like, actually, my dad, who I admire very much, and he's extremely creative aside from being a great cook, he's also a really great artist and an art history buff. And has a degree in art history. So a lot of that, like, I was just like, we always want to kind of secretly emulate our parents in some way. Maybe not always, but I sure did. And I really, really respected my dad and kind of just wanted to be just like him. So I was like, he was an artist and I want to be an artist. And, that's just how I saw my like life going.
So where did you move to specifically when you moved to the city?
Well, I lived in the dorms on 27th and 7th, which was a very interesting experience. I had a roommate who was like straight from Cartagena, Colombia, who was like seriously like majorly into cocaine and just like, like in the most serious way ever. Which is, hey, no judgment, but it was just like a really like funny experience. But then I moved to a really chill apartment actually up on like 106 between West End and Riverside.
So you're in Manhattan as a young woman.
Yeah.
Even though you had been in close by on Long Island, what was it like to gain that kind of separation from your parents and be free for the first time in the city, and then have such a clear idea of what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, well, I was actually talking about this with my boyfriend the other day, and I was saying that like we were uptown in my old neighborhood, and I was remembering like, that feeling of like being an adult for the first time, and you're like, it's especially interesting when you're in the city and you're an adult for the first time because you really feel like an adult. I'm like, this is my day. Today I can like, I'm going to go get my nails done and then I'm going to go wherever I feel like for lunch. And I live by myself too. So It was really cool. It didn't feel like so crazy, like being away from home, but it was really like liberating feeling like being on my own in the city. And actually, this is kind of cheesy, but I think maybe some of the female listeners out here could relate to this. Like, it was when Sex and the City was like a big time show, you know, and there was some kind of feeling about being like empowered as a woman and living on your own in the city that was just like really, really exciting. So yeah, like I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but it's like, it's funny, like people tell you that advice when you're younger and they're like, oh, you know, you think you knew what you wanted, but you don't know yet. And I was like, no, I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to be a famous artist. Like, I'm going to be like the female neck face, and I'm going to like write all like, you know, I'm going to write all over the city. And then like someday I'm going to be just like showing in galleries all over the world. And that was like definitely what I was going to do, like 100%.
So you were going out, you were exploring the city, you were seeing graffiti, you were probably going to a lot of gallery shows. Yeah. Were you also at that point involved with anything with food? Were you,
I was a
beyond
home cook.
Beyond going out and eating in New York City, did you feel that you had a passion that was...
Yeah, I mean, I was a home cook, you know, but in the way where, like, at that time, when I think about it, I would be, like, going to Trader Joe's and I would, like, get frozen pierogies, but I would, like, doctor them up with, like, you know, mushrooms and, like, you know, like...
Cooking is cooking. Hey, if you were turning on the stove,
but,
you're doing some cooking.
I think I was a little bit more than that. A little bit more than that, but I certainly wasn't, like, you know... aspiring to be a chef, but it was like the first time when, you know, I would have friends over a lot and cook for them, and people would be like, oh my God, your food's so good, you should totally be a chef. And I was like, whatever. I'm
going to be a graffiti artist.
Yeah,
chef. What a stupid job a
I'll
chef
have my
would
own
be.
chef. Thank you.
So you're in the city, you graduate from FIT, and you get a job doing window installations.
Yeah.
You're doing what you feel like you really want to be doing. You feel like you're in the right spot. You do that for a while, and then you move on, and you decide that you need a bit of a break.
Yeah.
And so you go on tour with a musician friend. This becomes a decision that alters the course of your life.
Yeah.
Can you talk about going on this tour and what happened?
Sure. Yeah, this is where the story kind of changes. This is like the moment that everything just became really different. I went on tour with my friend. His name was Mr. Liff, and we were touring with another group called The Coup. The year 2005, or like 2005, 2006. It was in December. So we were going between, it was like a nationwide tour, and then it was going to go international. And I just was like 22 at the time, and I really just wanted to kind of like travel and see the country. And like, that was kind of like such a cool thing for me, you know, because I told you I was really into underground hip hop, and I was like, oh my God, this is so fun. Like, you know, I got to hang out with all these people and like be around my friends. So anyway, between San Diego and Arizona, it was like 4 a.m. and our tour bus driver drove us off a 40-foot cliff in the middle of the desert. And the bus exploded, and I had been holding a red stripe in my hand, and it, you know, it crushed in my hand and like sliced my whole hand basically off. And then yada, yada, yada. And here I am now. No, I'm just kidding.
So he fell asleep.
He fell asleep and drove off a cliff. And then it was horrifying. You know, it was.
And who was awake in the bus?
We were all awake, actually. It was funny because we were talking about Anchorman right before we went on air. We were awake. We basically, without like boring you with the details, we all needed to be awake, because if we had been in our bunks, it would have been a wrap for everyone.
Okay.
So a bunch of us were in the front watching Anchorman. I had bought it like in a snap decision at Tower Records. So this really dates the entire situation. Right before I went. And then the people in the back, the Clips record, Hella Hath No Fury, had just come out. And so people in the back were listening to that. Yeah, and so we were all awake, and everyone lived, actually, without any, like, injuries that were too serious. My injuries were amongst the worst. There was a couple other folks who got hurt pretty badly. But yeah, it was a horrifying ordeal. I mean, I've talked about it so many times at this point that it feels like telling a story about a movie that I saw, like, oh my God, and then it exploded, you know what I mean? But it really happened, and it's
at this point, does it feel like it is your story, or have you shared it so much that has it lost some of its power for you?
I think that, like, that's an interesting question, actually. As much as, like, I've been asked about this, no one's ever really asked me that. It hasn't really lost its power. I think it's just kind of I've come to terms with it. It doesn't scare me. You know what I mean? Like, when I think about it. it doesn't scare me as much to be around. I used to be really terrified to be around like a barbecue grill or anything that could potentially explode. You know what I mean? Like those fears have dissipated. And I feel like what's happened since then has been so like rich and wonderful, not monetarily rich necessarily, but, the experiences have been so rich that like, it's felt validating in a way. Like, it's like, okay, well, this happened and then all this other stuff happened. So, you know what I mean? But it is crazy for anyone out there who's ever been in an accident or had like something just happen that's extremely unexpected. You probably relate, it's just like, it's a weird thing. It's like a worst nightmare scenario.
Do you think about it every day? Do you carry it with you in the back of your mind?
No, I don't really, actually. I don't think about it every day. And when I do think about it, I just feel incredibly lucky. It is a grounding thing. It is something that I come back to kind of gain perspective. It's very easy. We all lose our perspective all the time. And I think like we all have to kind of have a way to kind of get it back, and you think, maybe you just think of a worst case scenario. You think of someone who's had an unfortunate thing happen or a story you read in the news. For me, like if I start kind of like getting upset about something that's kind of insignificant, or I get in like a silly fight with a friend or a family member, I'm like, okay, like recenter. This is like very precious time that you have. It could have all been easily ripped away, and it can all be easily ripped away again. You know what I mean? So just like enjoy the lovely time that you have on Earth. You know what I mean? So I think that's actually the biggest takeaway.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. Korin is proud of their Japanese culture and traditions, but they want you to know that their products are not just for Japanese restaurants. Their knives and tableware bring out the best qualities of food from every culture and fit into every restaurant, from French to Pan-Asian to American, and that is why they're located in New York City, where people from every country in the world come to eat. Korin's unique store in Lower Manhattan is home to perhaps the most extensive collection of Japanese chef knives in the world, including Japan, plus the rarest natural sharpening stones and exquisitely designed tableware. They also host special events such as knife sharpening demonstrations and parties with New York's most famous chefs and restaurateurs. Korin is dedicated to this ideal, bringing the implicit and elegance of Japanese culture to your table, be it in your home or in the finest restaurant. For more information, visit Korin.com.
Welcome back to The Line. On today's episode, I'm joined by Zahra Tangorra. She opened Brucie in Brooklyn in 2010. When she opened the restaurant at the age of 26, she was the head chef and owner and had previously held no New York restaurant cooking jobs. We were talking before the break about an accident that sort of changed the trajectory of your life. You were in a tour bus with your friend, Mr. Liff, and it crashed. It went over... It fell 40 feet, and you were badly injured. After the accident, you received a settlement. My question is, why not start a company that was more aligned with either music or the arts or something that had previously interested you greatly and you thought was your direction in life? How did that settlement lead to you doing something unlike what you had done before?
Well, okay, so after my accident, I spent like a year or two just kind of like enjoying life and kind of taking some opportunities to travel and do stuff that I would have not been able to do before. So I went and lived in France for a while, and traveled throughout Italy and Spain, and it was really nice. And I was always really conscious of like, okay, well, you got this money, so have a little bit of life experience, but like, do something wise with it. Do something that you think is important and that matters, because this is like, you don't come across this all the time. So I love to cook. By that point, I'm like, 24, 25. I'm like my interest in food and cooking is like growing. And I had initially had an idea to start a very small pasta shop. Like, I'm from Long Island, as I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'm from Long Island. So pasta shops were like a big thing over there, or like in the tri-state area in general. And I was like, okay, like I love cooking. I'm going to start something really small. Make fresh pasta and cheese and have like salamis hanging from the ceiling, and it'll be really fun. And I was like getting more and more inspired by just like places I was going out to. You get older, you start going to like better restaurants and like experiencing food, and food was just becoming more and more important to me. So I had met somebody in the dog park by where I live who was a really great guy. He was really nice, and him and his wife were lovely, and they would come over for dinner, and he was like, oh, I really think you have a lot of talent here. I don't know, you know how it is when people are like, when you're a good cook, you cook for your friends, like, you should open a restaurant. You should totally open a restaurant. And at first you're like, I at least was like, I don't want to open a restaurant. Like, what are you talking about? And my mom would say, you should be a chef. You should open a restaurant. And I was like, no. And I was so against it, especially once I heard my mom say it. Then I was like, now I'm definitely never opening a restaurant.
At that point, it was a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Once your mom had suggested
exactly.
it, yeah.
I was like, oh, this is never going to happen. But, people just kept saying it, and I kept getting, like, more and more into, like, just throwing, not only cooking, but, like, really throwing dinner parties and, like, the whole picture, the flowers, the music, the entire experience. So by the time I met this gentleman, he was looking to kind of start a new project, and he wanted to invest in what I was doing. And he actually was the one who found the Brucie space listed online, and we went to look at it, and I had still at this point thought pasta shop, like, tiny hole-in-the-wall spot. But anyone who's ever been to Brucie, it's a pretty big restaurant. So it just kind of went from there. And we're like, all right, now we're going to have a restaurant. And long story short, this guy, ended up deciding to do something else and not wanting to be a part of the project about 2 weeks before we opened. And then, so there I was, I had this gigantic restaurant, no experience. I worked as a pizza delivery girl, you know what I mean? But
so you were ready at that point, yeah.
My pizza delivery girl experience, and me were ready to open a gigantic
50-seat restaurant,
a 72-seat restaurant in Brooklyn. And I was like, okay, we got this.
So you briefly just alluded to the fact of creating an experience for people when you were cooking prior to opening up the restaurant. Yeah. All the time when people ask me for a delicious spot to go to dinner that has a nice vibe, a neighborhood vibe that's friendly, that's inviting, or they had a special occasion, I would send them to Brucie. You were able to cultivate a type of environment there and a type of experience. Can you talk about what made Brucie special in your mind and about the type of experience that you tried to create for your guests?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think a wise woman once told me that everyone's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. And so I think the inexperience that I brought to Brucie was, at times like a problem, and at times like something that like I wish, you look back and like, oh, I wish I had just like had more training beforehand. But I think that the authenticity of like what we were doing, and what I tried to do really translated to people feeling like they were in some place that was kind of different. You know what I mean? And so I'm service oriented. Like the food is obviously extremely important, but I really wanted people to come in and feel like they were not just like at another restaurant. You know what I mean? Like not just like at another place, like, oh, we're going to the restaurant tonight. I wanted it to feel special, and I wanted it to feel, it's really important, and this is maybe a whole nother conversation, but like restaurants are just really important. If, they mean a lot to people for different reasons. People get engaged there. People break up there. People like come in after they found out really terrible news, or they go to celebrate an anniversary, and they also become like part of people's stories. So I wanted to make sure that we were giving them a good story.
I'll jump back to the opening and what that was like in a second, but you talk about people celebrating and sharing a moment at that restaurant.
Yeah.
For you, not having any previous restaurant experience, how did you go about making a place that you thought would be a restaurant that people would want to go in the neighborhood every single week?
Well, obviously the food was important, and like we tried to not just like let the concept trump the execution. You know what I mean?
Did you visit a lot of other restaurants and see what they were doing? Did you talk to people around New York about what they were doing, or did you just kind of decide and then roll with it?
Well, we changed our menu every single day, so everything was just like the food was really just about our own vision in terms of like creating a space that really felt homey and inviting. I mean, I had been going to Marlowe and Sons and Diner for forever. I used to live around the corner. And that was really the first time that I remember being in a restaurant as an adult. Of course, you have like your childhood memories of like special places. But that was the first time that I remember feeling conscious as like a person who understood what was going on in restaurants as an adult, about, wow, there's something like really special here. And I think the thing that I lifted from there was not like, oh, well, I want to do this kind of food. It was really just about, seeing how like Andrew had created a place where like the employees seemed to really like being there, and I think when you see that employees really like being where they are, it's like a completely different story. It feels like being at a party that everyone wants to be at, and that was the thing that I kind of took away the most, because I think those places always were like that, and they still are, and it's like a very special thing. So I really wanted to make a place that my employees felt proud of being at, and they wanted to represent, and it wasn't just like, when you go into a restaurant, you hear like two servers talking to each other, like, oh God, the boss, or like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here. You know what I mean? I think people who worked at Brucie for a long time really like loved it and felt proud of it, and that really rubbed off, and it was a big party. And I think when the customers came in, they felt like they were in on the joke, they were part of the fun.
Often a lot of the ways that people mentally deal with working at a restaurant is by talking about someone.
Yeah.
Oh, the chef, the boss. Like,
I don't doubt that happens too.
There's a way to kind of shift the blame to someone, right?
Exactly.
To a certain extent. But you were the boss.
Yeah.
You were the owner. You were the chef. You were in the kitchen. You were in the basement.
Yeah. I had
unpacking the delivery.
That's true.
How do you mentally deal with the experience of being 26 years old and being the person who everyone is going to for the answer to their questions?
Well, honestly, sometimes not that well, that was a really challenging thing, especially to be among your peers. And those people were my friends, and a lot of them still are my like dearest friends in the world. Sometimes really well, at the times when I didn't deal with it well, it was like suffocating. It was too much. I'm like, the cooking, the work, the floods, all of that was the like easy stuff. The people like hating you sometimes and being angry with you, that was really hard. Having to yell, or I guess no one has to yell, but let's just say yelling, and losing my temper and like going home at the end of the night and being like, I yelled today. I like cursed at people, you know what I mean? And not to paint the wrong picture of myself, because I'm not like a monster who's just like running around and like,
but there is a
that's tough, man. That's tough. That nobody tells you about that. That's tough.
There is a chef mentality that can be very common throughout many cities. That is like, there's this chef as an archetype of someone who flips over mise en place and throws plates in the garbage and yells.
I've done that, and for sure.
And so that is the type of chef that some people are, and some people are on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
How did you decide what type of chef you wanted to be, or did time determine that for you?
Well, you know what I'll say? I will say that it is the hardest employee to regulate as a boss, especially as a chef, is yourself. You know what I mean? Like when you own the restaurant, when no one's going to fire you, the worst thing that can happen is someone will quit. And that's actually very bad, or that you'll hurt someone's feelings, which is also terrible. But it's really hard to keep yourself in check and keep your temper in check. It's, as you know, extremely stressful to be a chef. It's so immediate. It's so quick. Like the product has to be perfect. Your reputation is on the line. Like everything happens really fast. So if something goes wrong and like a plate comes back and it's wrong, or one of your cooks puts out like a raw chicken, it's so frustrating, And as an employee, you can't just like go crazy and throw a plate in the garbage. But as a chef and as an owner, you absolutely can. Who's going to stop you, except for yourself? So self-regulation is a really hard thing, and it's something that maybe comes easier to certain personality types. I feel like, it's really important if you do, lose your temper to like learn a lesson from it. Okay, I lost my temper. That was unfair. Who do I need to apologize to? What do I need to learn about for the next time? You know, because that's just not like something that you want to do, or that's okay. But it's hard. It's really hard to figure out how to be, especially honestly, like as a woman. It's harder to gain respect as a female boss in any field, I think. And so sometimes sternness is something you feel like you need to kind of be more, you need to be more aggressive sometimes so people take you seriously. And that also can really backfire. It's tough. It's tough to find out. I don't think I really knew who I wanted to be until it was the end.
Did being a female chef, being in charge of the kitchen, did that ever make you take pause when you were doing things, or?
No, I didn't really think about it that much.
Okay.
I mean, it's a question you get asked a lot. It's tough for the obvious reasons of being a female boss in any industry is tough, or being a female just walking down the street is tough. You know what I mean? It's different. It's just an obvious, but like, it's tough when you think that someone would respect you more if you just were a man. So that's frustrating for a lot of people.
We were restaurant neighbors for a while.
Yep.
I would see you around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I liked the whole feeling and the vibe of that was that, what you were doing. And I was always super impressed. I always looked up to you as someone who was doing their own thing. You had a business. You were there all the time. And the food was really wonderful. And but you were always at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And I was always at the restaurant. And something that we talked quietly amongst ourselves about was about finding the personal balance and about the struggle to decide when to leave the restaurant. And what you alluded to is that as being the boss, there's no one to yell at you, but there's also no one to tell you that it's time for you to leave. So can you talk about the balance? And did you find a balance being the owner and the chef at the same time?
Yeah. On this one, I really have to give props to my now business partner, Jenny Lupo, who is the chef de cuisine at Brucie for about 3.5 years. And she was really the one who made it easy for me to leave. And in the beginning, it was really hard. Like she's amazing. She's like the best cook that I know, but it was hard. I was like, okay, I'm going to leave for the night. I'm going to leave you a list of directions. And then, with just a look, like she was so wonderful, even when we weren't like best friends and so respectful. She'd never say this, but with just a look, she's like, I got this. You know what I mean? And then like slowly but surely I was like, oh yeah, she's got this. So, a year into us working together, it was just like easy to that made it so much easier. But aside from that, it's just like, realizing that like your life matters, you know what I mean? And that the restaurant really matters. But like what I tried to do was really, really like drive home the things that were important to me during like menu meetings. Our menu meetings were so important. So like going over steps of service, like making everyone like making jokes and like asking people about their days, not as like some kind of trick. I really did want to know about their day, but just like engaging people and making sure that like we were all on board, we were all a team, and like everyone knew what I wanted, and not what just I wanted, but just really like what was the right thing to do, and that made it easy for me to leave because I'm like, these people understand what to do,
But how do you delegate while also creating a safe space for people to collaborate where the restaurant still stays in the form of your original vision? Well, how do you create that environment? I
mean, I spent a lot of time with my general managers too, and they would understand like how I would feel about things, and we would kind of really get on the same page. That like all of the GMs that I had over the years were also like really crucial. Having a good GM, anyone out there listening who wants to know, like the best thing you can have if you're going to own a restaurant, have a good chef. If it's not you, or even if it is you, like in my case it was Jenny, and have a good GM, and be open to people's opinion, right? Like be open to people's opinion, but understanding that you're the boss, and at the end of the day, like you know best, but you don't know everything. I guess that's it, right? Like you have a vision for what you want to do, but I didn't know everything, there was like a lot of things that like someone would be like, I think we should be doing it this way. I think we should fold the napkins that way. Or I think that our check should be presented this way, or, it would be more efficient if, this is how like water service goes, right? Like, I think it's about not being a control freak. That's like a very hard thing not to do, right? Like, you want to have your hands in everything, but you have to like trust yourself that you're going to hire people who understand you. You train them well, and then, that's the best you can do.
Brucie closed on February 15th of 2016.
Yeah.
What did it feel like to close?
Man, the actual closing, like the day, it felt like extremely emotional. It felt like if you were in a really, really deep relationship with someone and they got a job in like Russia and they were like moving away and you just knew it wasn't going to work, because it was relieving in some way. There's a lot of other things that I really want to do with my career now that, don't lend themselves to having a restaurant that ran the same way Brucie ran. It was like we were talking about, it was a unique kind of place and had a unique set of systems. It was also brutally painful. Like, it was so hard, and not just like, oh my God, this is so hard, there's so much work. It was so emotionally difficult and physically difficult, and the pieces of owning a business, it can be really heartbreaking. But it was also my life, my entire life. I loved it so deeply, and it was my creative outlet, and it was my identity. So it was a really mixed bag. And on the day it closed, I think I was so full of feeling I didn't know how to feel sad. But I will say that the months following it were very dark at times in terms of just feeling very lost and without like a place and not understanding like, what to do or who I was or what was going on, because I defined myself by the fact that I was Zahra and I owned Brucie, and I'm a chef, and people were like, what do you do? And I'm like, I gotta go.
Some restaurants barely make it a year. Brucie made it more than 5.
Yeah.
Do you view Brucie as a success or a failure?
That's a really interesting question. I felt like a failure when I closed. I felt like I felt mostly like a failure because I wanted, as a young woman, to be an example for other young women, that they can like do things. They can be restaurant owners. They can be anything. You know what I mean? And I think like the more success that I had at the restaurant, the more articles that were written, the more write-ups, more features, it was like another thing that like hopefully some other woman will see this and think that like, feel inspired and like they can do it. So when it closed, that really felt hard. That made me feel like a really huge failure. But I think those feelings are natural when like something that you try hard at doesn't work the way you wanted it to. But I think it was a success. I think it was a great success. I look back on the things that we accomplished, on some of the exciting events we did, on the press we got, on the people we met, on the food we made, the thousands and thousands of people that came in there and had a fun time. And it is obviously was a success. I think you measure success differently. There's financial success. There's, emotional success. There's creative success. So I guess it was a mixture of both, right?
Knowing what you know today, do you tell the 25-year-old version of yourself to do it again?
That's a really good question, too. You've got good questions. I think that you have a future in this. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think about the money that I had when I first started. It's hard not to think about it financially and think about, wow, I could have bought a brownstone back then, and I could have I could have traveled, and those are all like hypothetical situations, but I would have never been sitting right here. And this actually really means a lot to me, and I would never know some people that are like incredibly valuable. I've never met my boyfriend, who I'm like so lucky and like thrilled to be with. I would have never met Jenny and Nicole and my business partners now. And yeah, so I would tell the 25-year-old me, I would have told the 25-year-old me to like maybe save like 50 grand and just like put it away. Other than that, I would definitely say do it. Because it was incredible. It was the greatest party ever. And it was so beautiful and fun. So yes.
After the couple months of darkness, you emerged and you've now founded a new project with your partners, Jenny and Nicole.
Yeah.
It's called High Five Girl.
Yeah.
What's High Five Girl?
Okay, well, shortly, I'll just tell you a little bit about the name. I was walking down the street about a year ago, and I saw this girl walking down the street. Oh, and she was dressed really cool and I wanted to like high five her. And so that's where the name kind of came from, just like empowering women. High Five Girl is going to be a blog. That's kind of the center of it, a feminist food blog, like story driven, kind of like hard to talk about issues written through story with recipes. We're also doing consulting and kind of like large-scale catering projects. But restaurant consulting is one thing that we're really excited about. That's part of High Five Girl. So you get to take all the things that you did really well and didn't do well and mush them together and help other people do really well. So that's actually the best part of it.
Meatball and pasta plans in the future for High Five Girl in
I don't
some
know.
capacity?
Jenny and I were walking by the space on Smith Street the other day, and it was like a little ice place that wanted a pop-up during the winter, and we're like, oh man, we should just like sling meatballs out of this thing all winter. So perhaps.
The gears are turning.
Yeah.
Zahra, thank you so much for being
Thank
with
you.
us and being on the first episode of The Line.
Thanks. This was so fun.
Join us next week, Tuesdays at 11. This is The Line.
Thanks for listening to this program on heritageradionetwork.org. You can find all of our archived programs on our website or as podcasts in the iTunes Store by searching Heritage Radio Network. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at heritage_radio. You can email us questions at any time at info@heritageradionetwork.org. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization. To donate and become a member, visit our website today. Thanks for listening.
Hey, are you hungry? Well, you're in luck. Meat and 3 is back for season 16. I'm Taylor Early, and we've got a whole new batch of reporters I am so excited to introduce you to.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Fisher.
Asha McElroy.
Sam Girardi.
Jessica Gingrich.
Hannah from Wisconsin.
I'm a swing dancing audio engineer.
I am a future registered dietitian nutritionist.
I'm from New York, and I love rice and beans.
My favorite food of all time is a shrimp burrito.
I love watermelon.
We've also got a bonus podcast for you called Behind the Internship. 3 of our reporters will take you along to show how they develop stories for this very show, Meat and 3.
Hi, I'm Danielle Flitter, a plant-based chef from Philadelphia, living in Mexico City.
I'm Sophia Hooper. I'm a bartender based in Portland, Maine.
My name is Addison Austin Liu. I am a chef and food journalist from Salt Lake City, Utah, and my favorite food is Peruvian.
Rice and beans.
Hand-drawn noodle soup.
So tune in to enjoy a square meal for your ears. And I hope you saved a little room for dessert.